afternoon, Maine. You are watching the Muddy Waters podcast, and I am your host, Chuck Ellis. As you know, if you've watched before, the Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state by sharing stories that the mainstream media is not really interested in sharing with you, and hearing from people from around the state, sharing their experiences and expertise and all that kind of stuff. And today we are fortunate to have with us Gregory Yates, a retired teacher from Portland and Lewiston Adult Ed, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Greg. So, again, we do have this thing called the Maine Wire, and they do report on information that's going on. We're very fortunate to have them, but the mainstream media doesn't really want people to know what's going on here in our state. And one of the beauties of these long form interviews is it gives people from around the state, real people, the ability to share their stories, so that people know that this stuff is really happening. It's not made up. We're not conspiracy theorists, all that other kind of stuff, but there are real stories. And that's why I was really excited to have you come on and share a little bit about who you are, where you come from, what you've been up to, and then how that relates to Maine politics and what's going on with our voting here and voting registration and other things.
And other things.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck, thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be able to share the things that I've experienced that I think relevant to the folks in the neighborhoods and the towns and cities around me here in Maine. I'm actually in the Brunswick Topsom area, and to start out, I'm a Californian. I joined the Navy out there in '73, and they put me right there in San Francisco Bay Area for 20 years. I was a sensor operator. Those of you that were flying Brunswick, you know what that means, sonar, radar. And I did that for 20 years out of Brunswick until they closed my base. And they sent me here Moffett Field in California. They sent me here to the base in Brunswick for my last 6 years. And I retired as a senior chief sensor operator, AW they call it. And so I retired in '99 and decided the taxes really forbid me from going back to California. I love California. It's a beautiful place to visit, great tourist hotspot. They priced my whole family out, so all my kin are either in North Carolina, Oregon, or I'm in Maine. And we're working real hard to price me out here, but haven't hit that level yet. So anyway, that brought me here to Maine in '93. In '99, I retired, and I went to USM for 3 years to finish out a bachelor's degree in applied technical education. And I worked for a company called EnvisionNet. You might have heard of it. We had 5 call centers around the state. I was the training and quality manager of EnvisionNet. And they got bought out by Microdyne at that very moment, that week, Chuck. I got a call from the United States Navy and said, "We need you back at the Brunswick Naval Air Station." And I said, "I don't wear a uniform anymore. I'm retired." And they said, "Oh, no, we want you as a civilian." So they hired me back as a civilian instructor for Wing 5 here. So I taught all the flight crews for 10 years. Great job until the base closed. And when the base closed, I was like, what do I do now? I have a teaching degree, so let's see what that does. So I taught day classes in Portland and night classes in Lewiston. And most people don't believe this, but after 4.5, 5 years, Lewiston outbid Portland and actually paid more hourly by quite a bit than Portland did. And Portland said, look, we can't. Computer tech, that's one price. Clog dancing is another. Everybody gets the same hourly rate. Lewiston at least recognized that if you're teaching clog dancing, you shouldn't quite get the hourly rate if you're teaching workers how to use computers in the workforce. So Lewiston offered more money, so you go where the money goes.
There you go.
So you can't blame them, right?
Right.
I couldn't. I went back to Portland and said, I'd love to keep teaching for you, and she said, I just can't. The school board won't do it. Everybody gets the same rate. So I was with Lewiston for the last 10 years, I guess. Yeah. Teaching workforce, Excel, Word, hardware, software, operating systems, networking, security, all those things that work into being computer literate for any type of workforce. A lot of my students went to went to bank teller jobs, nursing jobs, because the computers are all over everywhere, any job you go into. So, and a lot of what I taught was language skills. Because, let's face it, 95% of my students were immigrants of one form or another. And so a lot of it was these were people with bachelor's and master's degree in some cases in one form or another of computer science. And they were in my class just to learn English on a topic they knew well.
Mm.
It's easier to learn a language if you like the topic
Mm.
instead of Dick and Jane ran up the hill.
Yep.
So anyway, I enjoyed it completely. But that's what I've been doing up until this year, is teaching in that. And the topic came up. This was a workforce class, so you had to go into employment process, taxation, how you fill out W-2s and W-4s, how we did mock interviews with real employers in the Lewiston Auburn area. So we tried to get the students completely ready. Now, Chuck, you also keep in mind that my class were pretty much a captive audience because they were all on hold for 6 months without a workforce authorization. So what do you do for 6 months when you've landed? And again, I haven't done the math, but I'll bet you over 95% of my students were asylum seekers, not immigrants. Okay.
Okay.
The immigrant is that State Department coordination with Somalia or Djibouti. Asylum seeker is mostly Congo or Angola, threatens their life. They get a tourist visa to Baltimore and they land and they say, I seek asylum. And they
Or
get
they or maybe they were coerced by our federal government to come to South America and make their way north and cross the border illegally and then claim asylum.
you know, of all the students I had in Lewiston for 8 years, and I had 4 classes a year of 18 students, and then there was all the evening classes and the others. But say 100 students I had a year. I kept track of where did you call port of entry. And Chuck, you know how many told me they came across the southern border? One.
One. Wow.
One Angolan flew to Brazil, who flew to Colombia. I said, how did you get from Colombia to the Texas border? Oh, no, Arizona border. Texas is dangerous, he told me. I said,
Huh.
how did you get to all these places? You had your own money, so you flew to Brazil on a tourist visa. How did you get to all these? The church took me.
Hmm.
So you walk across the Arizona border, and yes, the church put me on an airplane and flew me to New York. The church? It's the NGO, Chuck,
Mm.
Catholic Christians Charity.
Catholic Charities. Ah, interesting.
And that's what they kept calling the church.
Huh.
But he was the only one. Everyone else either flew, now, oft times to escape Angola, they had to take a tourist trip to South Africa. That was their most common because you could just drive south from Angola, it's not far. Then they get on the airplane there to Baltimore or Boston or New York, okay, and they claim asylum when they land. And the trick, according to many of them, especially from Angola, is you can't let the cat out of the bag before you leave. The government doesn't want all their middle class technical workers leaving the country. And that's who's coming here. It's
Hmm.
people in professional skills. That's all I saw was people with professional skills. I had several MDs, who of course can't be a doctor in America, they won't let them. A lot of lawyers, legal types, real estate banking, a lot of banking types.
Hmm.
Uh, One banking type, he was a mid level manager at the bank, and he kept telling his management that this loan request didn't look right. It didn't look legal according to the banking laws. And they kept saying, do it, do it, do it. And finally, he opposed it. Well, then he found out the loan was for some El Presidente's nephew or something. And they literally,
Uh-huh.
and the father says, you get out of here. They're seizing your home. They're seizing all your assets. They're going to kill you. You need to leave now. That's the type of corruption they were against in Angola. And a great guy, and I'm glad he's here in America. He's going to be a great worker for America. And he, straight into banking, has a lot of knowledge in it. And Angola also suffers from a border dispute just north of them. And so there were several that said they fled. And I said, well, it said in your packet here you came from Texas. Yes, we flew to Texas. Well, why are you here? Well, they found us in Texas. The assassins that
Hmm.
they were opposing this border dispute. I don't remember the country name, but there's a small area between Angola and the country just north of them, a small little area in a river area that they fight over constantly. and
Okay.
the father of this guy was part of the resistance or something. And so, he said, you got to get you and your family out of Angola. So I
It's
think a
it's
lot of
interesting. It's interesting. I think this isn't the main point of what we're eventually going to talk about, but it's
right,
very fascinating stuff. But I think it's helpful to note because I think one of the things, like I'm a conservative, I think that you shouldn't cheat the system to come here, all that kind of stuff, right? But like, and I do think that the from the data that I've heard, I mean, Angus King himself, who wants to let a ton of people in, was saying somewhere around 80 to 90% of asylum cases are declined
yes,
because they're economic migrants. But the reality is that's not the case for everyone, and we need to be
no,
careful not to make prejudgments about how people got here. I think that's the
right,
danger. That's the challenging thing for us as Mainers, as because I do believe that there are a lot of people who didn't come here the right way,
right,
but we have to be careful not to make the assumption about
yeah.
individuals. And so,
Well,
and that a lot of people are great people, and I think that's something
I,
we need to take into account as well.
and who I saw, Chuck, were asylum seekers almost 9 to 1. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
immigrants, they were kind of, well, what are you going to do? I don't know, and they're kind of lazy about what they're going to do. The State Department gives them a car, gives them an apartment, gives them everything, so there's not a lot of incentive. Asylum seekers, my student teacher was in a one-bedroom closet, had a chair and a mattress on the floor, and he had a master's degree in technology. Okay,
Yeah.
and he didn't come here for some, he's on his own dime. Whatever money he saved is now he gets financial assistance for rent and food only because he's dirt poor. But he'll be working. All of my students were so anxious to work. But again, the students who would come to me to take the class, again, you didn't have to pay for it, but that would get up and come in and take the class were the motivated ones.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
can imagine there's a lot, Chuck, that just got here and hey, it's all free. But for asylum seekers, it's not all free. They get rent assistance and food stamps, an EBT card, but they don't get anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, it's make that distinction. Now, the danger, Angola, if you're not aware of it, when I was in the Navy, Angola was a Soviet satellite, just about. The
Yeah.
Soviet Union propped up the country and ran the country, and what happened was what the Soviets said to do. Well, when the Soviet Union fell, it became complete unrest, and the Chinese came in. So the communist China run Angola right
Whew.
now.
So
And in Luanda, the
yeah,
capital, there's a huge liquid petroleum plant, which most of them are
ah,
bussed to work for a week and then bust home. They don't have a lot of liberty or choice of what they do in Angola. It's pretty
hmm.
much what the communist Chinese say to the Angolan government they want out of the arrangement.
Sounds like a case of yeah, out of the frying pan into the fire, going from the
Absolutely,
Russians to the Chinese, both communist, yeah,
yeah. And so
regimes. Yeah.
a lot of the asylums from Angola, which I would say Angola's probably were 60% of the split between Angola and Congo. They're Portuguese speaker, and a lot of them know English quite well. But the they could forecast that it was just going to get worse.
Yeah.
Okay, now Congo is a mess. The students
it,
I
it
had coming
is.
from the
Yeah.
Congo were just. One guy says, "Look, Teacher Greg, I got two daughters and a wife." I said, "Where are they? Are they safe?" Well, they're with my uncle up in the hills. Why? What are you talking about? Well, you have to understand if you have daughters in the Congo, it's not a matter of will they be raped by the time they're 14. It will be how many times will they be raped by the time they're 14, and how many
Mm.
of those times will be by the police.
Mm.
There's no justice. And of course, now we have, if you're wearing proudly this in the
Yeah.
Congo, they cut your head off. They just did it. They locked 70 Christians in their church, and the Islamic guerrillas went in and macheted their heads. So
Yeah.
70 Christians died because they wore a cross. And
Yeah.
that Islamic push of the guerrilla fighters coming down, the Congo can't stand up against them. So there is real death threats, I think, in the Congo. Whereas Angola, they see and fear what China may do. But I really had very few students that I thought were here to quote unquote cheat the system. I guarantee you there are. I know that.
Sure.
But the ones we saw in adult ed were the ones, again, like I said before, had an interest of really making a go at it here and really trying to make a future for their family and their kids. Almost all my students were in their late 20s to early 40s. They were all professional people with skills, jobs, and so forth and so on. Moms and dads, and so the one individual I'm talking about, and in every class we talked about registering. For work, you got to get a social security number and an ID number at least, because you have to pay taxes. You work in America, you pay taxes. So, how does that work? And so I explained to him, and we really didn't get into it at the time, the voting. But in the September before the November last election, I had a student from the previous class walk in, Zach. He was 41, 42-year old, professional, two kids, wife, a great guy, best smile you ever saw. And he came, Teacher Greg, Teacher Greg. He was so excited. It was between, I had the class on a break. And I said, what's up, Zach? He goes, I get to vote. I said, what? I get to vote. I said, in what? In the election, November election, I get to vote. I said, no, you don't. He goes, no, they told me I can vote. I said, why did they tell you you can vote? Because I pay taxes. What do you mean you pay? You mean you don't have a job yet, Zach? Well, when you buy things, you pay taxes, and everybody who pays taxes can vote. I said, hold it. Peter Classroom, sit down at this computer, do this Google search. Who can vote in a U.S. or state election in America? It says over 18, citizen. 1, 2. There's only two things. Nothing else matters. You're over 18. He goes, is this true? I said, Google said so. you know, uh, but you got to be over 18. You got to be a U.S. citizen. He says, but why? I said, well, Zach, and I explained this to every class afterwards. I said, when I vote, I'm voting for either a bill, a bond issue of some sort to support an issue of payment or purchase in my local community, or I'm voting for a representative, be it a state rep or a senator, or a federal rep or senator. Uh, and those people are voting on how to spend money, mostly, how to spend money. And that money they're spending is in my name. I'm the citizen. I own the checkbook and I'm responsible for that checkbook's balance. Okay. Until I die, I'm responsible, and my estate afterwards is responsible to pay the bills that they vote okay for. Now, you're here now, and you may even start paying taxes if you get a job here. You'll have to. But if you leave next year to go back to Angola, are you liable for the bills and accounts that they vote for? No. You're not a U.S. citizen. You can go back to Angola or to Germany or China, wherever you want, and you are no longer responsible for the payments they voted for. I can go anywhere in the world, but I am always, as a U.S. citizen, responsible for those bills. If I go get a job in Germany and live in Berlin for 2 years, every year I have to pay U.S. taxes that my state reps and senators voted for. That's the difference, Zach. That's why I have the right to vote for it, because I'm voting for what I'm going to be billed for and my children will be billed for the rest of our lives. You can leave. You're not a citizen yet. Now, when you do hopefully become a citizen, you're assuming the debt that these state and federal representatives pass in your name. That's the difference. That's why only citizens should vote. Because if you're not a citizen, you don't have a vested, responsibility to what these people do. You can just leave. I can't. I can go anywhere in the world, but as long as I have U.S. citizen on my name, what they do in my name, I owe. And he goes, oh, I said, so tell me, Zach, if I go to Angola next year, can I vote in the Angola election? Oh, no. I said, okay. What country would do that? There's a couple, and I looked it up. There's only like 6, and
Yeah.
most of them are Scandinavian. But no, and so I really was disturbed over this, Chuck.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
talking, so I'm gonna let you jump in here.
No, no. I mean, I'm just fascinated by, just like, I don't know. I get fascinated is the wrong word. Just one of the things that the Democrats, for instance, anytime we bring up the idea that people are they're registered to vote, the non-citizens are registered to vote, they tell us that there aren't any. And then, when the main wire does some investigative journalism and discovers that they have proof that there are, the state doesn't do an audit to verify what they could easily do. They could easily verify. Instead, they just want to know those particular names, and who knows what's going to happen there. But they keep telling us it's not happening, and then when we say it is happening, they're like, "Well, it's not happening that much," and I'm not even sure that's really real, even though the receipts are there, so to speak. And so, like, this is just a game that the Democrats are playing right now. Is it's not happening, then when we prove it is happening, they're like, "Well, it's not happening that much. There's no way to prove that it actually influenced the election." And the reality is, we don't even know how bad the problem is.
Yeah.
But this is just another piece of evidence. Like you work with these students, and you care about them, you want them to stay, even whereas there are a lot of conservatives that would have them go back home, right? Like, but you're somebody who's saying, like, I like these people, I care about them, I want them to stay. And that's the reason that this was a huge red flag for you, because if they get caught voting
Right.
illegally, what
Even
happens?
registering to vote.
Right.
You just register to vote, you broke the law.
Right.
And these guys are smart, and they know they have to play by the rules or they're deported easily and quickly.
Yep.
So any breaking of the law, they're frantic over. That's why they get in so much mess with the medical group, because they do anything a doctor says because they're afraid of deportation. You
Mm,
know, so it
interesting.
really disturbed me, irritated me to no end. And I went to three people, Chuck. I went to my boss, who was very responsive to it, and she
When
immediately,
when was this? This is this last year?
yeah, before the
Okay, just
November
checking.
election,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
last
Yeah.
presidential election.
Yeah.
So right before that, I took it to her, and she says she put out a notice to all the instructors. This is mostly English ESL classes. We all had to include civics in our class, some way or another. She didn't dictate what civics was. Now, to me, I just said, everybody, look up what's it take to vote in America. That was my civics class. Let me clear this up. You cannot vote here. You can't even register to vote here. If you do, you're breaking a U.S. law. You got it? You want to be deported? Don't do that. So that was my civics lesson. But we talked about how many senators and how many congressmen and the difference between state and federal. And so it was a good addition of a half hour into the class that was, I think, useful. I also went to we had a rep at the Adult Ed New Manor Resource Center. They're still there, very helpful. And in fact, the director of it was my old student. So I went over and talked with her. And I said, this word is getting out from somewhere. Please help me identify where it's coming from so we could stop it. Somebody is abusing the trust of their clients, of the people they're supposed to be serving. And she was appalled. She did not hear, but she agreed with me. It was probably an immigrant social group being exploited by
Yeah.
people, or a church, because they're all associated to one church or another in the Auburn Lewiston area, is being used as a point to get word out. But one of these social groups is probably getting that word out that
I
you
have
can come on
another
down.
I have another theory. I'll tell you in just a second.
Okay. And so she said she would go to all her resources. And I also talked to, and I believe it was the state senator at the time, Brackley, we thought.
If it was last year, it wasn't Brackley, because he's been gone since
It
before
was, I
then.
looked him up in Auburn, and I talked to a staffer, and I
I
told him
think,
the
or
same
maybe,
story. And, they kind of said, thanks for the information. We'll do something about it. And I don't know anything. But
yeah,
what really ticked me off, Chuck, was these are good, family oriented, decent, hardworking people that truly want to come here with the fire in their heart that your grandpa and my grandpa came here with. Okay.
yep.
And somebody is putting them up for deportation to meet a political agenda, a bias. They wanted their guy or gal to win. And they're willing to sacrifice this family's life and create great suffrage and hardship on these asylum seekers to get their guy elected.
Mm.
I'm like, how low can you be? This is, I just want to,
I just
if the
like to highlight
crocodile's
this.
around my neck, I can't say what I'd like to do to them, but
Sure. Well, I mean, you could. There's a movie called Boondock Saints, where
yes,
they have
yeah,
crosses around their necks and they do some
pretty
interesting
harsh
things,
things in the
pretty
name of
harsh
God.
things in the name of God. Not necessarily saying they're right, but I do understand where they're coming from sometimes. But I just want to highlight like a couple of things, like I mean, because this is a matter of people using human beings as
Yes,
pawns in a
Absolutely.
game. And also, like, part of the attempt and part of the effort by the Democrats, and this is why we need to be very careful as conservatives to still maintain compassion and care
Yes.
about people, even if we don't agree that maybe they came here legally or not. The enemy, like, I'm reminded, I think I quoted this a couple of days ago, but I'm reminded of the scene from Catching Fire, the second movie in the Hunger Games series,
Hmm.
where one of the characters is saying to Katniss, um, remember who the real enemy is, and the enemy are the people up top, are the
Yeah.
politicians who are trying to manipulate and
Manipulate.
use people for their own ends, not the individual who is taken advantage of. And
Yeah.
one of the places that this is happening, I'm convinced, because I don't, they probably have a policy at some of these places, these housing places, because there was a
Yeah.
housing organization that I met with, that is actually, they're technically for profit, but they get a lot of government money. And one of their initiatives is voter ID, not voter ID, but voter registration.
Registration. Yeah.
I'm like, well, what does a housing organization have anything to do with voter registration? How does that make any sense at all? It doesn't make any sense at all. Your job is to take care of the housing needs of people.
They have a really good mailing list.
Yeah,
I mean, they have a resource to connect with all those people.
yeah, yeah,
And
and so,
you can
like,
start out in Portland. I mean,
yeah,
the low income housing in Portland, I know them.
yeah,
My student teacher from 4 or 5 years ago is the IT director for them.
yeah,
And he could put out an email to everyone in a heartbeat. All the immigrants, there's, I think, over 1,000, 1,100 residents that are almost all immigrant or asylum seekers. And so going to a housing group makes sense because you have the audience,
yeah.
and you're the landlord, so they're going to listen to you.
Yeah, and they're risking these people's ability to stay here. And I want to highlight another thing because it's really important. You're talking about a group of people who are primarily here. They came here through legal means, then they
Yeah.
claimed asylum. Did they? Is that a bit of a workaround? Absolutely. But is there anything illegal in what they did? The ones
No.
that you're talking about, the answer is no. That is not illegal. That is legal. People who cross the border illegally and then claimed
Yeah.
asylum, different story. That's not primarily the people that we're talking about. And I think it's important to note that, um, in this conversation. And so these are people who are being used as pawns,
Yeah.
because the expectation is, because of the fact that Democrat organizations take care of people, or organizations that are heavily Democrat and skewed to the left take care of people and then try to manipulate them to think that Republicans are all racist and hate
Yeah.
people, and all these other things, so that these people will vote Democrat so that they can win elections, and at the risk of people being permanently deported to a country where their life is at risk.
And I think once the people I met overwhelmingly, once they were offered the facts of the matter, they vote Republican. I really, because they saw how manipulation and how corruption within a government, what it did to Angola. They saw
Yeah,
what corrupt cops were like in the Congo. So they don't want Philadelphia in the streets of Maine. They don't want lawlessness. But the other thing I come up with, Chuck, is if it's bad, fine. I'll argue with you. I'll talk with you until I'm blue in the face. I'll try to get you to see my way, and I'll try to see your way. Somewhere in the middle, we need to change the law. If it's bad that people are doing this, if we don't want asylum seekers to be able to do what they're doing, change the law. And I heard Trump saying he was going to put a point system out. When Hillary Clinton was up for election, I had just retired from the Navy and I had a 401k to envision that. And I told my wife, I said, I am not going to let that lady touch my income in any way, shape, or form. I went online, being the computer geek I am, and I applied to move to Australia. If I'd known what I know today, I wouldn't have done it. But back
yeah.
then, Australia seemed like a pretty good sane place. I've been there quite a few times. And
Yeah,
you know what? Here, I got a bachelor's degree in technology. I got a Navy retirement that pays me quite well. And I got turned down. I was not allowed to immigrate to Australia. My
hmm.
points were not sufficient. And I called the embassy, the local 1-900 number or 800 number, and they said, well, Down here, item 16A. That's pretty much what you got to be able to check. 16A. Do you have current employment in Australia? Yes. That's bing, 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 bing. You have enough points. You
Mm.
don't check that you have a current employer that's willing to say, yes, I'm hiring Greg Yates for Sydney's plant, whatever. I could come. They said you could come as a tourist and find work and then reapply, but you could not apply for residential status as a resident. And I was like, why don't we have that? Why don't we have a point system? What do you bring here?
Well, half the problem that we have with the current immigration system, I think, is that I mean, we're such a divided country, right? Like
Yeah,
we've got some people who, Charlie Kirk, who I generally speaking like, and Steve Bannon, who I think is net positive, is what we'll say. Some people love him. I think he's okay. I think he's got some good things to say, but I think he's a little harsh as well. Both of these people would say that we want to just completely close down immigration
right.
entirely, and I think that's crazy. And not only because my wife, I'm biased, right? I'll be honest. Here's my wife. This is me
Yeah,
and my wife getting
beautiful
married.
woman. Yeah,
She's from Rwanda.
congratulations.
She's currently in Rwanda, and she's generally like living in Kenya until we can get her here through the legal process. But I think
Yeah,
especially in situations where people are married, legally married, actual real marriages to people from other countries, they should be able to bring their spouses here. I mean, I think that just makes
yeah.
sense, right? Um, and
But
I think that
should the
they're
spouse be able to vote?
not immediately.
Well, I had a Canadian lady come up to me in class and say, I made the mistake of being told I could vote, and I did. And it was 6 or 8 years ago. And I got a letter this year saying it's been detected that I broke the law and I didn't. You can stay in America because you're married to an American, but you will never be able to vote in an American election in your whole life. It was quite blunt. And she
Yeah,
says, I can even earn citizenship. And they still, because I broke that law 6 years ago.
yeah,
So it's pretty hard over when they do catch them.
yeah,
Um, the,
yeah. So but yeah, and I think it should be harsh penalties when people illegally vote because you weren't, and I think one of the things that we've gotten away from in our society in general is consequences for actions,
right,
right? We have this, oh, it's like, but they were going through a different, it does, like, if we do not have consequences, people will continue to break the law, right?
yeah,
Like, if we, like, this is what happens. We see this happening in our state right now. All these people who are committing really super violent crimes at this point, and eventually it's like, oh my gosh, he shot and killed 3 people. It's like this guy had been arrested like a dozen times, 30 times in some cases, and let back out because it wasn't deemed bad enough. And now all of a sudden something bad happens. We have to have consequences for actions. And but going back to immigration, like, look, there's on the Democrat side, they basically want to almost have open borders, largely I think because they incorrectly, as you're pointing out, think that this is going to help them win elections. It can maybe in the short term, but in the long term, people wake up and realize what's happening and are more interested in voting Republican because a lot of the places that people are immigrating here from are either Muslim or Christian countries. And these people, guess what? They don't agree with the gender ideology and some of the other stuff
no,
of
the
the
Muslims are.
Democrats. Very
One
opposed.
Muslim guy says, Mr. Greg, what would you do with a gay guy? And I said, not my cup of tea, but I'm not going to kill him. Well, in my country, they kill him. We just throw him off the third floor, third story floor.
Yeah,
And he says, how can you stand them? How can you? He was just boiling in
yeah,
his blood.
yeah,
And I was like, all of Minnesota is Muslim now, and yet I don't understand how the liberals win elections because
yeah.
Muslims don't like most of the liberals' message. So
Man,
but also you can see
is
down
it?
in the Southwest where I'm from. I was born in San Diego and raised in the southern half of the state, and the Catholic Hispanic group, they are not happy with what the liberals are doing. You can come across and work the fields, earn a living, do it properly, do it legally, as they did where I was from in the San Joaquin Valley for years. But you don't just let in anybody
Right.
and not know what their intent is. Back when the workers came across, they had to say, who's their sponsor? What farm is sponsoring you? How long will you be here? Is it one harvest? Up here in Maine, we have people from the South coming up to harvest, but I think it's called a harvest visa or an agricultural visa that allows
Yeah.
them for a certain amount of time. But when that is not monitored, um, it's just Hell's Gate for whatever that wants to get up here and do wrong, such as the Chinese growing their cannabis.
Well, I used to work in banking, and I know that like there were, this wasn't agricultural, but it was like to work in tourist related, to work in hotels and different things like that. And they would get this like 9 month, I think it was either a 6 or a 9 month visa. They could extend it, and then but a number of them just never went back. Right? They just like at the end of their time, they decided to stay. Some because they came from a number of different countries, but some when they got here they just disappeared. This is like because
Yeah.
I worked with the owners and stuff like that. This was their path to get here, and they just disappeared into the system, and nobody saw them. And so anyway, so you got one side. I just want to like finish this,
Let,
and
let,
then
let me finish up.
oh,
Let
go
me
ahead.
finish up. One last point on that.
Yeah.
My last class, I had a young man, very smart young man, multiple college degrees. He's probably in his late 20s, early 30s. And he had a really bad tooth, really bad, you
Mm-hmm.
know, abscess, had to go to emergency room over and over again. And finally they said, look, it's got to come out. We're going to pull it. He came to me so angry and upset. They're going to pull my tooth, Mr. Greg. I said, well, I've had one pulled. You get to be my age, you get it pulled. He goes, no, I don't want a crown. I want an implant. So I looked it up. I said, let's look this up. An implant was $7,000. A crown was 3 to 5,000. I said, this is Maine Care. This is not Medicare. You have no insurance. This is the Maine taxpayers, and you want an $11,000 implant on the taxpayers because you didn't brush your teeth enough. I'm sorry, we're going to pay to have the tooth pulled. We can't see you walking around the streets, in pain. But beyond that, I did the math of all the teeth in your mouth. And I said, all the teeth in your mouth, if we went through this process of crown and implant for each one, it would be $1.3 million. So, no, the state of Maine taxpayers are not going to fund that. But he was
Mm.
so angry that we were selfish and didn't see that he was a young man and he deserved an implant. And I'm like, but you have to understand there's no such thing as free in America or anywhere in the world. It's not free. Somebody is footing the bill.
Right. There's a
And
cost.
we, the taxpayers, should be able to say, look, I'll be nice to this extent, but I wouldn't even do that for my own son. So why am
Right.
I doing it for you? Uh,
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
Maine Care was the worst because every day's absences were I had to go to the hospital. I said, no, don't tell me hospital. Tell me you went to the doctor because hospital means you were in a wreck or, you got a limb hanging off. But they went to the ER. And,
Yeah.
a class of 18, probably, Chuck, upwards to 2 or 3 a day were medical something because they were told it's all paid for. Come here, we'll give you this shot. Come here, we'll do this. Babies, baby checks like every 2 months, constantly. The To me, the hospitals were making a mint because the asylum, the immigrants would do absolutely anything they were told they needed to do. Because again, if they don't, they'll get deported. It had that kind of authority
Hmm.
of a court or a police officer. I said, you do not have to do what the doctor says.
Right. It
It
doesn't.
is still
Yeah.
your body.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe that. I said, you can deny. They want to give your baby 13 shots. You don't have to let them. You can say no. And they couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
And so I think of all the costs of immigration, the thing we miss the most is the cost of Maine Care.
Yeah.
It's busting the bank because, and it's not that they're selfish, other than the one guy I mentioned. The rest of them are told to do it and they think they have no choice. They go.
Right.
They go, they do, they take, they buy, whatever they're told to do. And so the hospitals have a captive audience and literally can write their own check for the folks that are there. And again,
To a degree, there is the flip side of it is that main care pays such a small percentage of like the cost of things, but because of how many, yeah, I mean they're definitely paying a lot, and even outside of main care, there's that one case where the governor somehow authorized a payment of almost $1 million
right,
for care for some non citizen And it just like the cost. So before you were talking about how like we don't really give a lot to asylum seekers outside of, I want to highlight just for fun, outside of housing, food, and medical care, right? Which is, when you add all those things up, that's a
It's a big chunk.
huge
They don't get a
cost.
car though.
They don't get a car, no.
And their
If they
medical and their housing support is dependent on their financial statement they turn over.
Right.
So they do have to show what they have. Now they can hide it. I'm sure people can hide their resources.
Oh, believe me, I worked in banking. They're really good
Yeah,
at hiding it if they need
it's a
to
whole
hide it.
profession, right?
Yeah. And when I say they, I mean anybody, Americans trying to stay on the system. Like what,
No,
it
I
doesn't matter.
understand.
Like they're very, they know the limits of what they can do, reportably and not.
So
And so, but
my
before
bottom
we,
line on immigration, folks, if I could just speak for a
yeah,
moment, as an old man to other Mainers, they're not all bad. They're not all good. I think the ones that we see in the system at FedCap or at the adult ed programs in Portland and Lewiston and around the state, they are there because they really want to make a go of it. They're not lazy. They want to learn the language. They want to get a good job. And almost everyone, I'd say almost everyone, the instant they got work authorization, hey, I got my job, Teacher Greg, they're just excited. Most of them working at LePage Bakery or something to start. This guy with a master's degree in IT, and he says, I said, where are you going to get a job, man? He goes, probably St. Mary's, because they hire anybody right now, and I can get enough money to get a car. Then I can look in Augusta and Portland. My wheels will get me opportunities beyond Lewiston, Auburn. So
yeah,
that's the attitude I heard in almost all of these. Now, I will give one caveat to that, and I don't know this is still true in Portland, but for the time I was in Portland, a lot of Sudanese immigrants, and most of my immigrant students, be they asylum or immigrant, were women. It
hmm.
seemed like we got a bunch of men from portions of Africa who had a real chip on their shoulder about not wanting to learn English, not wanting to assimilate. They wanted to sit on the street corner in Portland and sip their little cafes. And the women came to class religiously because they were the
Hmm.
mama bears. And they're realizing the husband's letting the job down because they got a chip on their shoulder because they can't get him work immediately because they don't know English. And they just had a nasty attitude about it. And the more I drove around, I saw it. But I did hear from a teacher down in Portland. She said, an astounding thing's happening to the immigrant population in Portland. Divorce rates are going through the roof
Hmm.
because the women are just fed up with the husbands that won't step up, and
Hmm.
they won't take up responsibility. They won't learn the language. They won't go out and get the job. They just think, and this is the immigrants. This is
Yeah,
stuff where the State
yeah.
Department's going to keep feeding.
Well, we
It's like
definitely,
looking.
that's a part of a assimilation that we don't want. I'm being a little facetious here, right? But
No,
like,
yeah,
we have a problem with divorce in our culture for sure. And the problem could be that people get married too quickly, or don't think
yeah,
things through, or whatever, or they just decide to quit too easily. But either way, that's unfortunate. But in so many different ways. But I think yeah. Anyway, it's fascinating. We could deal with human nature, but
yeah.
real quick, I'm gonna put a quick ad, and then we'll be back for a couple other continue the conversation.
Okay.
What does your website say about your business? If you've tried hiring a freelancer or doing it yourself, chances are it didn't turn out the way that you'd hoped. Outdated, hard to use, unprofessional, and let's be real, a bad website isn't just frustrating, it's costing you customers. I'm Chuck Ellis, co-founder of Moralist. I started this business because I saw how often small business owners like you were struggling with websites that didn't work. That's why we created our website rental service. At Moralist, we don't just build websites. We create platforms that build trust, help your business grow. For one affordable monthly cost, you'll get a custom design, secure hosting, and round-the-clock support, all fully managed for you. No surprises, no huge upfront cost, just a website that works. So if you're ready to take your business to the next level, click the link, sign up today, and let's build a website that you'll be proud of. All right. Yeah, and so, but when I say click the
Send it
link
up.
in that, just for the record, it's the QR code right up there at the top left, for anybody who's interested. But yeah, going back to the immigrants, like as you said, like the vast majority of them. It's interesting to hear that like most of the ones that you're engaging with are. Sorry about the sun seems to be bothering you now, but
No,
um,
I have the power. I can do this.
yeah. But again, the challenge, a lot of the people that are seeking to learn English and assimilate are the women, and a lot of the men are not, which is unfortunate. But yeah,
Well, again, like I said, that was specific to Portland.
okay,
Lewiston, I didn't see that.
you didn't see that. Okay,
Portland had Somali, or excuse me, Sudanese immigrants. Most of Lewiston's were Somali,
okay,
and
yeah,
it seemed to
yeah,
be a cultural thing with that population.
okay,
And those were
interesting.
all immigrants. Somali and Sudanese were all immigrants.
Yeah.
Djibouti's immigrants. Um, whereas
So I
we
think when you when
found,
you when you say when you say immigrant, I think what you mean, because immigrant is anybody who comes here from another
right.
country, right? But I think you mean like the refugees that came through the legal process where they were deemed refugees and got
Well, and I've been to Djibouti and Somalia, and the way
yeah,
it works there, I've talked with several students that there's a lottery system within
yeah,
Djibouti.
yeah,
The government of Djibouti and our State Department agrees on taking,
yeah,
3,500 or whatever. Djibouti comes up with a lottery. How do you get picked? So, 10,000 people submit. Yeah, I'd love to go to the U.S. And how do you get picked? Well, most of it's who you know. But there's no specific qualification requirement, no capability, no income. So that is that arbitrarily chosen group of people just get thrown here. And they're, it's like the park rangers say, don't feed the critters; they become dependent.
yeah.
And I always told my classes, one of the last things I told them was, I said, "You want to know how to really enjoy the freedom, the liberty guaranteed by our Constitution? Come to America with $1 million, and you will know freedom, you will know liberty like nobody's business. It's the instant you are beholding to somebody that you lose your liberty.
Mm,
The instant you owe the city of Lewiston or the state of Maine or the federal government, the instant you have to submit for money to eat, to rent, to get gas for your car, the instant you're beholding. And I said, you notch off a bit of the liberty that our founders had framed us to enjoy. And I asked him, I said, "Am I a free man?" "Oh, yes, Teacher Greg, you're free." "No, I'm not. I own a mortgage. I'm legally beholding to a bank for the bill of this house. Now, if I owned it outright, I'd feel pretty free. But right
except
now,
for
I have a,
taxes.
well, yeah, that's true. But that was the point is that you really won't feel the freedom that was intended to the
Yeah.
descendants of our founders until you can stand on your own 2 feet and say, "I made it on my own steam." And I always ask him, I said, "What's more important? When we say the Pledge of Allegiance, um, what's more important, liberty or justice?" Yeah, with liberty and justice for all. So what's more important?
Yes.
Two people, you and I, can totally disagree on what justice is.
Right.
Justice in the court is whatever the law says to the judge to do. So if the law changes, the definition of justice changes. I was told
Yeah.
that in Portland, Cumberland County Courthouse when my aunt was killed by a drunk driver. The judge told us when we walked in, we said, "You have to understand that you are not here for justice. The only thing I can do for you is apply a law that a legislator wrote, and a jury
Mm,
will pass unanimous. If you see in your eyes that that call is just, I'm happy. But if it's not, I can't do anything about it. You have to elect somebody different."
mm,
And he says, "You're in the most liberal city, in the most liberal county, in the liberal state of the nation. You are not going to get that guy in prison." That's what the attorney said.
hmm.
You're never going to get 12 jurors not to say he was a Vietnam vet. He was 3 times over the legal limit when he hit me and my aunt crossing the street, killed her instantly.
Hmm.
But the DA said we will not get a conviction. He was a suspended driver's license for 1 year and time served in jail, which was about 2 weeks, for killing a woman 3 times over the legal limit. And I'll
How
never
and
forget.
how is that?
And
Yeah,
he
it's
told me
definitely not
if this had
justice.
been
Yeah.
Arkansas, if this had been Tennessee or Texas, he'd be away for life.
Wow.
But there's always going to be somebody on the jury that's, oh well, the poor guy, he's got problems, And nah,
We've got misplaced compassion.
yes,
I
absolutely.
remember there's a song, and I'm reaching out to see if I can get rights to this song to be able to have it be my intro to my podcast. But anyway, there's a line from this song. It's called "Selling the News" by a band called Switchfoot, and it says, "We get binary code mixed up with abuse." Is one of the things. Oh, gosh. So related to, oh man, my brain, I lost it.
Wait till you turn 70.
Yeah, but but basically, we have a justice system that is actually not, not in line, not in line with justice, right? Yeah, I guess that's part of it, right? We get binary code mixed up with abuse. I think that's part of the point
The
right
point
here, is that
was,
something happened to you and therefore this is why it's so difficult. It's like, I get it, but this person still violated somebody else's rights and took somebody's life away, and all they get is a suspended license and a couple like months or weeks served.
weeks.
Like, that's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. Like, you
And I
you
stood up there.
eliminated, you took somebody's life. Like, how can that be the consequence for that, in addition to the fact that you
You
were
know what
doing
the
something
argument was?
that is,
We
yeah.
weren't in a crosswalk. We were at the Shogun restaurant south of the main mall. It's a rural highway, and we parked across the street at the VIP Auto Parts. And I was walking my aunt across the street. There was a hill coming up to it,
Hmm.
and the crosswalk was a quarter of a mile down the way. But this is a rural highway. I went up and down the highway. There's like 57 mailboxes across the street from the homes,
Yeah.
either way. So people walk across it without a crosswalk all the time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, but
Well,
the point was is that in any two people, justice is seen totally different, and you can never agree to that. But so
yeah.
liberty is an element. So I said, okay, then you get the argument. Peace now. We want peace. So what's more important, folks? Peace or liberty? What is most important to you, peace or liberty?
I think our
And
founder said,
liberty,
"Give me liberty." Who is it that said, "Give me liberty" or "Give me
Patrick
death"?
Henry, give me
Yeah,
death.
Patrick. Yeah.
But then that's the point. I will fight for peace, and I will enjoy it once the fight is done. But the instant some entity, power, stands up to my liberty, I must forsake peace. I must put it down for a time to resecure the liberty for me and my generations, and then I'll enjoy peace again. And I always tell them, I said, look, if you want peace, if peace is all you care about, let's you and me go down to the Cumberland jail in Portland. We'll go down the basement to security, to the lockup in the bottom, solitary confinement. We'll lock you in there, give you 3 meals a day and a bed and a nice TV set or something, and you will know ultimate peace. Nobody can mess with you. Nobody can say a harsh word to you. Nobody can object to you or hit you or threaten you in any way. You will have ultimate peace in solitary confinement. What did you have to give up to have that peace?
Your
You had to give up
freedom.
your liberty. You
Yeah.
had to give up your freedom.
Yeah.
And are you willing? I
Yeah.
want peace. You ask any sailor, soldier, or Marine, what do you want? I want peace. I was, for the most part, a peacetime sailor. For the most part, I fought the Cold War, lost
Hmm.
27 dear shipmates, but
Yeah.
we kept the peace
Yeah.
because a Yankee or Delta class ballistic missile submarine never got its payload to launch off. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one of the things we also wanted to make sure we took some time to talk about. Appreciate your service, by the way, and like, peace is something that's worth fighting for. But again, liberty. One of my
peace,
favorite movies is
peace,
Braveheart. I don't know if you're
yeah,
familiar, obviously familiar
oh
with
yeah,
Braveheart, right? The famous line when people are like, "We're gonna run, go home, and we're gonna live, or run and we'll live."
yeah.
And he's like, "At least for a while." And then one day, years from now, lying in your beds, would you be willing to trade one,
Yeah.
every day from this day to that, for one chance to come back here and tell your enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom? And I think that, obviously, just really great line, and just
We had a
very
motto.
important element.
We had a motto in the P3 world,
Hmm.
and that was the airplane I flew all 36 years: life, liberty, and the pursuit of all those who threaten it. That was
I
our
like it.
motto.
Yeah.
That was great.
So you taught at adult ed for how many years?
Uh, well, uh, since 2003, I guess.
Okay.
I
Wow.
worked for EnvisionNet for 2 years after I finished the Navy in 2000. Yeah.
Yeah. And how come you're no longer working for adult ed? I hear you're recently, not by choice,
Retired.
retired.
Anyway, and again, I mentioned it. I just turned 70. My plans were to work until 75, as long as my brain can hold out and I can provide the service to the students. Then I was happy to do that. And I did teach more than my class. Day class was the Applied Workplace Technology, which did 40 hours of workforce training, which they called Work Ready. That was the soft skills, communications, everything. Um, so that was the soft skills class. Actually, it's the same class that's taught to prisoners before they are let out of jail, to try to reorient them to being productive and successful workers. Then the rest of the class was, as I mentioned, hardware, software, operating systems, networking, and security, plus all of Microsoft Word and all of Microsoft Excel. That was the whole class, and it lasted a little over 2 months. It was 3 days a week, 4.5 hours a day, so there's a lot of homework. But I also taught Excel at night, QuickBooks at night, taught soft, I taught Ancestry, my hobby, and
Hmm.
so I taught a lot of things. And like I said, as long as I could do it productively, I was part time. I never worked more than, what was it? You had to stay under 39 hours every 2 weeks. You couldn't be, or you had to be called full time and all that stuff. So I didn't need their benefits because I'm retired Navy, so I had all medical and everything from the Navy. But we knew the contracts that help pay the day classes. Night classes, people enroll in them and pay personally. If you want to take clog dancing or Excel, you pay for the class as an individual. But day classes are all paid by some government entity or local entity. And so staff meetings were going down. We knew the contract cuts were coming up because the Title IX issue with Governor Mills and President Trump and the transgender athletes in Maine. And I was a little nervous about it. And then finally, my director called me in and says, Greg, the cuts are happening. It's going to be to the two contracts that primarily fund you. And we're going to try to work out some other thing, but I don't think we can. It was a lot of iffy. I said, well, so what's my choice then? Well, I said, okay, so what I'm hearing is my choice is I'll be unemployed and I can go to the unemployment line, or I can go and retire with MPERS, which I had, some money saved up with 8 years of work with MPERS. Because when you work as a teacher in the state of Maine, you can either have your retirement money go to MPERS, the Maine retirement system, or go to Social Security. Well, after about 10 years, I said, well, I've topped out Social Security, so I swapped it over to MPERS for the last 8 years teaching. And so I had some there. So I submitted MPERS. It was a great process, and I got money from them monthly, some. But the whole point came down to I got the choice of unemployment or retirement because a 14-year-old couldn't win a trophy against other guys. So he said, I'm a girl to get a trophy. And I'm like, are we really going to mess with educational budgets that impact huge numbers of people because some 14-year-old boy got his feelings hurt about not winning a trophy? We're not weighing the options here very well, I don't think. And if that's true, heck, Chuck, I want a trophy too. I want to go and I want to sign up for the Special Olympics and win me a trophy.
Hmm.
Should that be right? I'm just going to claim that I'm disabled and I should be able to run against
Yeah.
people in wheelchairs because I want a trophy? This is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I have a
Yeah.
granddaughter, and I hurt that she will be growing up in a society who won't honor the the, the absolute. unquestionable differences, biological differences between a guy and a girl. Hey, can a girl kick my butt? I guarantee you there are women out there that kick my butt.
Yeah.
But if we're both trained wrestlers and we're both trained wrestlers for 4, 6, 8 years, I'll have the edge every time, strictly because of the chromosomes I was born with.
Yeah.
And that's just a scientific fact. And if they're not willing to acknowledge that, then, we helped this one kid win a trophy at the expense of what? These three girls who did all the work. Not only did they lose out on a trophy or a ribbon or something like that, but all the college
Yeah.
um, sponsorships and endowments and scholarships that they lost out on because they weren't the number one in the region.
Right. Yeah. No,
And
it's crazy.
so I hope, I hear different things about Laura Libby and all the fighting she's doing to try to rearrange this stuff. And the other thing is, Chuck, this is a bit off of it, but it's absolutely crazy that we think in this little pea brain up here, we know more than the Almighty about how the anatomy and physiology of a body was intended to be and operate from birth, from
Mm,
inception, and that we can lop off organs, add organs, change things, and believe that they'll connect in a positive way for that child's future with the brain. You can't stop lopping off stuff down here and not have it affect what it's connected with the heart
yeah.
and the brain. And how many cases do we find that the after regret? 10 years
Yeah.
later, 15 years later, 20 years later, they're going, why did I let them talk me into this? Well, you were 14, you were 16.
Yeah.
I had to turn 18 before I could have a beer in the Navy. you know?
Yeah, no, and
So
it's crazy. And just for fun, because would not call myself an expert in this. This is an issue that I'm passionate about because I think it's absolutely crazy, and it devastates me what we're doing to our kids. But like the data from like, so sometimes the liberals who want to say that this is good, they'll kind of cite that years after having done these surgeries and going through this stuff, the people who did them still think they made the right decision, right? But what they don't highlight is that their mental health has not improved.
right,
Right. In many cases, it's gotten worse. There's higher rates of suicidal ideation. Actually, not just suicidal ideation, which is what they cite, which is like people being depressed and things like that. But actual suicide rates rise post post transition rather than any of the nonsense that they say. So we're really harming children in irreparable ways, all in the name of like being nice. And it's so bizarre. And at the same time, because this is just crazy and other people that recognize that it's crazy, we're losing, jobs. And like, I just want to highlight that what you did was helping people prepare to be able to get jobs, or
that's it.
get
But
skills that they could use to advance in their career. This is what we call workforce development. This is something that's so important to our economy. One of the places that the government was spending money that actually led to people making more money and paying more money in taxes. This is something that we should want, and we lost this position because our governor could not decided that she wanted to look like she was standing up to a bully rather than doing what was right.
that's right.
And it's
But
all political posturing. She knows the truth,
yeah,
as do everybody else in this equation.
I don't
But
know how much
uh,
she knows or how much she's told. I don't. I
uh,
don't hold out a lot of hope that she's really all that smart. I think she's all that manipulated. But
it's
poor
well within
Charlie
the
Apple.
world of, I mean, you kind of are owned by. It's where I remember there's a great fun movie called Man of the Year with
Yeah,
Robin Williams running for president, and he talked about how he thinks all the politicians should be. It should be like NASCAR, where the
yeah,
people who own you should
yeah,
have it, on your shirt, so we know who you're who you're beholden to. Which I think there's a lot of truth behind that, including PACs that spend money on you, regardless of whether it
yeah.
goes directly to you, all that kind of stuff. So, um,
Let me add
so
one other
yeah,
point, Chuck.
yeah, yeah,
While it's up here, about workforce, you brought it up. The workforce development was pretty much my technology workforce, nursing. We had tellers, today's teller, which was get people in the banks.
Yep.
and construction skills was taught once a year, and I actually taught that for 8 years. To that end, though, construction skills was half paid by the Department of Labor, and it was cooperative with the Department of Labor there. And we outfitted these guys and gals with their boots, their jeans, their workbench, their belts, first tools. If they needed transportation help, there was one time they put tires on a guy's car because he couldn't get to work. They got uh, put into a job. There was 5 different contractors in the Lewiston Auburn area that would hire the person for 90 days, and so you were guaranteed work. Now, Chuck, it went pretty good for a couple of years, but the last couple of years, we couldn't fill it with native-born Mainers.
Mm.
A fill was like 4 people. We couldn't get 4 people in the Lewiston Auburn area that would go get these construction skills, a guaranteed job, guaranteed blah blah blah, and all we could do was get immigrants to take it, the asylum
Yep.
seekers.
Right.
And you know what they came down to? So many of them, because construction skills is one of those jobs where one of the first things they test for is have you no weed in construction
Yeah.
because of
Work,
legalities. They
well, and
can't
working
have
with
it in your
heavy
bloodstream.
machinery and yeah.
You're driving a 5-ton truck or a backhoe or God knows what. The instant there's a wreck, there's blood drawn and lawyers lawyered up. And so the contractors told us, look, within 20 days, they're all going to get a urinalysis and a blood screening on this date. And if they can't pass it, we can't hire them. And that all the 20-year-old Mainers, a whole bunch of them dropped off right there. They couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I said, you can go cook food, you can go be McDonald's, whatever, but if you're going in construction, you have to be drug free. And it's not because they're
Yep.
trying to say, booze is better than drugs. It's just the legalities of an accident. And so that really made
Yep.
workforce difficult in Maine to fill the construction jobs that are around here. I hear that, well, all we see around here in the construction jobs is the immigrants. You know, the guy around
Yep.
the corner had his roof redone. There was 8 immigrants doing his roof.
Yep.
They're willing to give up the drugs to get to work.
Well,
So
it's interesting because we have a society that doesn't raise children to value hard work, right? And this is part of the problem. Like there's a dual problem that we have right now where we don't have enough people who are working, not because we don't have enough people, but because we haven't trained up our children
right,
as a society well enough to be ready to do hard work, regardless of where that might be. And I'm talking like at every level, right? So we've got a shortage of workers. And so we kind of, in a sense, at this point, until we address that, we need foreign born workers. And this is like not popular among conservatives, but it's true. Do we need to get other people to work? Absolutely. But right now we're in an environment where we are short on skilled laborers and then people to do kind of the manual work that our children are don't really want to do. And so anyway, it's sad that not enough people here, like American-born people, essentially are willing to do those hard jobs, knowing that you can actually do really well for yourself
yeah.
in construction. And so,
My neighbor's kid
and
took
a number of a
welding
lot of
at
yeah,
Bath High School, got
yep,
out, took a skills job, and a year later he's earning enough to buy a brand new motorcycle. It's quite nice and quite loud. With his income welding at Bath Iron Works. If he'd have gone to a 4-year liberal arts college, in 3 years from now, what would he have? $70,000 debt and no skill to sell. You know,
right,
so 1 year investment in welding schools has earned him a lifetime income. And
right.
so here's one dad to another, Chuck. When you got kids yet, you don't, right?
Not yet. Hopefully soon.
Here's the secret. One word: chores.
Yeah.
Kids need chores. They need
Yep.
to know what it is to feel responsible to get a job done to a satisfactory level. And I always taught my kids, look, chores are not mean. It's not being mean. You're just a part of this family, and you owe part of that obligation to being a helpful unit within us. And just it's simple: work hard, work fast, and get the job done. Don't bellyache about it for 4 hours because I don't give you a chore that'll take more than 15 minutes. So
Yep.
work fast, work hard, get the job done. Go play. but we don't get chores.
Yeah,
My
no.
granddaughter gets chores.
Yep. Well, yeah, no, I definitely, I think that that's a great, I think tool to like start the process with kids is to
Mhm.
give them chores, make them clean up after themselves,
Yeah.
things like that, that we,
Be
again, we don't,
responsible and be held
yeah,
accountable.
yeah, that we need more of in our society. I also think the education system needs dramatic reform. I think in high school, these teenagers being put in the same place all together, and creating their own culture seems like one of the most toxic things that we could have ever created. And I think we need to separate them a little bit more and have half of their job be on the job trainings and shadowing people and different things like that. But anyway, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on and share your story of the things that you learned of, people who are registered to vote, and we're lied to, by people, and we've got non-citizens registered to vote because people are giving them false information in hopes that they'll vote Democrat, and it's unfortunate, it's dangerous, and I'm sorry that you had to lose your job because of the governor's decision to childishly try to make it look like she was standing up to a tyrant, in our president who's just trying to protect girls' sports and spaces.
But as my wife always says, everything happens for a reason.
Hmm.
And it freed me up to help my good friend Dr. Paul Goslin for the last month fight for his legal issues down in New York State. And
Yeah.
that's for another day, another talk. But
Yeah. We'll have to have you back on to talk about that because that's a topic in and of itself, and we want to hear his story
the
as well.
lawyers
Yeah.
will free up the videos and the other information we have out, and we'll definitely, because the ideal is we want to get this video okayed by the lawyers to make sure it's not causing more problems than help. And then we want it on podcast. We want the videos out available for the world to see.
Yeah.
It's just such an injustice.
Yeah.
And to think that that can happen in our America today is pretty atrocious, scary.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I was
Well,
free to do the work.
yeah. Well, we're for that's fortunate at the very least. Good things come out of it, and I do believe that I'm a Christian, and all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. So,
I love it.
I appreciate that. So,
Two
all right.
homeschool programs in Auburn are calling me because
Oh,
the Catholic high school closed,
yep.
and the parents don't want their kids to go back into the public education. So it
Nice.
all happen out. Okay, Chuck,
All
thanks so
right.
much.
Well, thank you, and thanks everybody else for watching. Again, check out the shorts, and be sure to like, share, subscribe. Check out our merch, some fun stuff, nice hats like this, and nice little coffee mugs. Supporting the Muddy Waters podcast soon coming. I think there's going to be some coffee. We're actually going to be selling some coffee, I think, in the near future. So check it out. But support us in one way or another. Again, like, share, subscribe. The shorts to these videos are a lot easier for people to watch. So check us out on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. We tend to post these shorts also on YouTube. And wherever you're going to find your podcast, check us out. Thanks for watching. We'll be back